You're listening to the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast. Now here's your host, Fran Duffy.
That's right. We've got a rematch of Super Bowl 52 as the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, continues. I'm Fran Duffy, and I think we've got a great show for you here on episode number 216. At the top of this week's show, we've got Chalk Talk, where I catch up with NFL Film senior producer Greg Cosell to break down exactly what we're going to see here on Sunday afternoon, Lincoln Financial Field, Eagles, Patriots. Going to be a really fun matchup. Excited to dive deep into what these two teams are going to offer on both sides of the football here on Sunday. Should be a great matchup. Excited to dive into that here at the top of the show with Chalk Talk. After that, we're going to dive into a player on this Patriots defense. It's a little bit unheralded, a little bit under the radar, but a guy who's been a real impact player for them this year and has seen his role increase dramatically over the last couple of years. We'll get to that in Scouting Report because it's a really fun discussion on projecting college players to the NFL. But let's not waste any more time. Let's get into my chat now with Greg Cosell. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Let's get down to business. It's time for Chalk Talk.
Pleased to welcome back to Chalk Talk here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, none other than Greg Cosell from NFL Films. Greg, hope the bye week was friendly to you.
It was, actually.
I'm sure, it's...
I mean, it doesn't affect my life a whole lot.
Well, it made your Monday a little bit easier.
It made my Monday a little bit easier because I didn't have an Eagles game to watch and a Patriots game to watch, believe it or not.
Exactly right.
Which was very interesting.
Yeah, the NFL did the favor for the Eagles of after having that long road trip to say, we're going to give you a bye week, and then you're going to play two tough teams who are also coming off their byes. So
Correct.
New England's coming off the bye this week,
and then Seattle has a bye after. Yes,
so that was nice. That was a nice little tidbit.
Yeah.
There. But all right, let's get into this matchup because we talked a lot about the Eagles and kind of the state of the roster. Last week. Since that point, there were a couple roster moves by the Eagles. They put Deshaun Jackson on injured reserve, so if he does come back, it will not be until the playoffs,
which we kind of anticipated would happen.
Sure, yeah. And then I think also another big one is the release of Andrew Sendejo. We talked about
you thought that might happen because of the compensatory draft choice.
Yeah, and you talked last week about the prevalence of the four-corner dime look from the Eagles when they last took the field against Chicago. So you saw Jalen Mills and Avonte Maddox inside. We saw Darby and Rasul Douglas outside. So a little bit of a change.
They probably knew that was coming with Sendejo. I don't think they woke up one morning after that game and said, "Okay, let's do this."
Sure. Yeah. And we saw a lot of press man coverage the last couple of weeks from this Eagles defense.
Last 2 weeks, we've seen a lot more man coverage.
Yeah, so that's something to keep an eye on for starting this game. But let's start with the Eagles offense going up against the New England Patriots defense because number one, we usually start with the Eagles offense, and then number two, this Patriots defense has just been so lights out across the board. We've got these stats, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see you can hear it in the piece of paper. Ben Fennell does a great job of putting these stats together for me each week, so we get ready for Eagle Eye, and we get ready for Eagles game plan. And what he'll typically do is if a team is bad in one category, he'll highlight the stat in red. And if they're really good, he'll highlight this in yellow. Now, if you look at this sheet, there's a lot of yellow.
Is that the defensive side of the ball?
That's the defensive side. That's a lot of yellow going down the street where they are top 3, they're top 5 across the board in a lot of categories.
What's interesting to me, and I find this stat fascinating, maybe others won't.
Okay.
What is their record, 8-1?
Yes.
So they've played 9 games. I did that math in my head, by the way. 8-1.
That was impressive.
Was that impressive? You know how many third down conversions they've given up in 9 games? You probably have that in front of you.
I think I do. No, I have the percentage. I don't have the amount.
Well, I believe the percentage is below 20%.
It is below 19%.
There you go.
18.9.
But the actual number of third down conversions that have been converted into first downs in 9 games is 20. Think about that.
It is absurd.
That's a remarkable number.
I'm pretty sure there was more interceptions than touchdowns allowed.
Right.
There were a bunch of crazy stats.
But I mean, in 9 games to only give up 20 third downs that become first downs, that's pretty remarkable.
So a formula for winning football.
Usually, yes.
All right, well, let's kind of get into this, and I'm thinking we'll just kind of go phase by phase here.
Okay.
Let's start with quarterback and Carson Wentz in this Eagles pass game going up against this New England secondary and what they'll do from a pass defense standpoint. Let's start from a coverage standpoint because we'll get into the pressure afterwards. How do you anticipate the Patriots looking to try and defend this Eagles offense from a pass game standpoint? Because it's a man coverage-based defense.
Well, I'm going to try to think like Bill Belichick, which is impossible to do because he's way smarter than I am.
But if anyone in this room can do it, it's you.
Well, I don't know about that.
Just in this room.
Right.
Here.
I think Bill Belichick's going to look at this offense and feel that It's a quick game rhythm passing offense.
Okay.
That the ball normally comes out relatively quick by design.
Yep.
By design. There are times, obviously, guys are covered and it doesn't come out as quick. It's not really a big explosive play type offense. They might take a shot here and there, with a shot play. So to me, I think he's going to do what they've essentially done all year, which is play a lot of man coverage, press at times, try to disrupt the receivers, which then would disrupt Carson Wentz, and take away the pass game that way.
Yeah.
I don't see why they would change up the fact that they've been a fairly high percentage man-to-man defense, and we've charted a lot of that at NFL Films, and they play man coverage about 70% of quarterback dropbacks, and it's either first or second highest in the league.
Right.
So I don't see anything about looking at the Eagles offense and having Bill Belichick think that he can't line up and play man coverage.
Yeah, and this is a defense, that you mentioned all the man coverage that they play. We talk about this. This is a team that's very multiple. They're very versatile. I'd like to get a definition for you of what that means. What does it mean when we say they are very multiple? What does that mean?
Here's how I would describe them, and we've talked about this before. I would say that in terms of their fronts, they're extremely multiple with their fronts. A lot of different front looks with a lot of different personnel. Their coverage is relatively consistent in terms of the man-to-man concepts, but depending on the opponent, the people that play and the matchups that they do are different. That's where the multiplicity on the back end comes in. They play man, but some weeks you could have Jason McCourty, who's a corner covering the tight end. Some weeks, they do different things with
that way.
They're a really tough watch defensively for me, not because I'm confused as to what they're doing. It's because there's so many personnel packages.
It's a lot of note taking.
That I'm just trying to figure out why. And of course, because it's Bill Belichick, sometimes I just have to watch the play 6 times and then say, I have no clue why they're doing that, and just move on to the next play.
I think what's so fascinating about studying, the Eagles they played Detroit early in the year. Matt Patricia, they operate the same way. They're playing Miami with Brian Flores here in a few weeks, and we'll see the same thing again. I think
Detroit played a lot of man coverage as well.
Yes, exactly. So I think ultimately, what makes it, in my mind, when we talk about, they're a multiple team, you talked about all the variety and the change of personnel in that front seven. What I think is so fascinating is they'll come out and we'll say in a base 3-4, or even if they're in their nickel where it's 3 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, and 5 DBs.
Well, a lot of times their front is 2 down linemen and everybody else is standing up.
Right. And so they might line up. Let's say it's a 3-3-5 nickel. It might look like a 3-4 where they come out and there's 3 guys lined up, head up over tackles, and you've got 2 guys standing up off the edge and 2 stacked players. Or they might come out in a 5-over-5, or they might come out in a 4-2, kind of what you were saying, where you've got all these different looks with the same personnel. So you can't kind of get in on what their tendencies are and how they're going to line up. Oh, this run look, if they come out in this personnel, we're going to call this run play. You can't get synced up in terms of what their tendencies are from a formation and a personnel standpoint.
It's a great point. And I think what people have to understand, and I learned this years ago from talking to coaches and as I watched more and more tape, as I kept learning, is fronts are not dictated by the number of people with their hand on the ground or the number of people standing up.
Correct. Yep.
People say, well, they were 3-4.
Right.
Well, they might have 3 guys with a hand on the ground and 4 guys who are standing up, but that doesn't mean they're playing what's considered a 3-4. You could still be playing a 1-gap defense, which most teams do, by the way.
Yep.
When you have 3 people with the hand on the ground and 4 people standing up. So defensive fronts are dictated by the gap concepts, not by who has their hand on the ground.
How many times do they come out in their big nickel or their dime, and Patrick Chung is playing as an outside linebacker in what would look like a 3-4 defense? Like it looks like, they're in their base 3-4, but it's actually 2 safeties playing, one as a stack backer and one as an edge player. Like that's the way this team comes out and plays, and it makes it very tough to prepare for.
No question.
All right. I want to ask you about some of the personnel while we're talking about from a matchup standpoint. Stephon Gilmore, they signed over from Buffalo, has been a very, very good player for them. But just talk about what makes him the quality of corner that he is.
Well, first of all, and I think this is probably overlooked a lot when you talk about corners. You and I, when we do our college tape study, as people who do college tape study do, we look at the traits, change of direction, transition, all those things that we like to jot down and make ourselves feel like we're really smart.
Try to.
Yeah, exactly. And he certainly has all that.
Yeah.
But I think he's really, really competitive.
I mean, that's a trait. People hear, I say this all the time, and it's really important, especially at that position.
No question.
Yeah.
Especially in today's NFL where you just never know when pass interference will be called if there's any kind of contact whatsoever. But he's super competitive. And I think one thing that I've noticed, and I've had this conversation with my good buddy Matt Bowen when we've talked, doing the matchup show, and he's taught me a lot about secondary play, is one thing I think Gilmore is really good at. When a receiver does get his hands on the ball, he's really good at then playing through the receiver to knock the ball out.
Yep.
And that's a trait too.
Yeah.
And I think he's really, really good at it because every corner gets beat.
Yep. No question.
It's what happens when you get beat.
Well, that's why I was.
And when I say beat, I don't mean a guy's 5 yards behind him.
Yeah. To me, when you talk about competitiveness at the corner spot, that's one of the things I love most about Jalen Mills is that it's like you said, every corner gets beat over the course of a game. Whether you get beat on a play, you get beat early in the play, you get beat late in the play.
Right.
How does a guy recover? Does he show the ability? He doesn't panic. He comes back. He plays through the hands. Is he going to battle at the point of attack in the run game? Is he going to battle at the line of scrimmage and press coverage? All those things. And then if he does get beat, how does he bounce back? Does he show the ability to kind of recover from those kind of things and one play flush it and keep going? All those things I think show up in the greatest corners, and certainly Gilmore is one of those guys.
And the other thing, and this is not just true of Gilmore, but a couple of plays stand out to me, is I think they're so good, their corners, at playing the technique that the coverage requires.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think sometimes we lose sight of that because I know for a fact that the Patriots, when it comes to teaching, are so strong on the little nuances of technique.
Yeah.
That's what they teach. So, let's say you're playing cover one, and cover one has a single high safety, and then it's man-to-man across the board.
Yep.
And a receiver runs a route toward the middle of the field where you have safety help right there. That single high safety is going to be behind you. They have such a great feel. Gilmore's really good at this, but they all are to a certain extent. Such a really good feel for understanding exactly when to undercut the route.
Yep.
And that's a science. That's not just, let me try it now.
Right.
And I think the Patriots are so good at those little details in coverage that they take away throws.
Yeah.
Or if the quarterback does throw it, he throws it to a corner that's in a very good tailgate or undercut position, and it makes the completion much more difficult.
I think the teams that we've seen, the really good defenses over the last few years that, maybe major in like one, Legion of Boom with cover three, even, we talked about Sean McDermott a couple weeks ago in Buffalo and what they do a quarter standpoint. When you play a lot of this one coverage or this one type of coverage, you'd start to get really good at it.
Right.
So that's one of the benefits of being that way defensively.
Well, and that's, just as an aside, that's the debate with coaches about coaches that love to do a lot of different things.
Right. Keep you guessing.
And every once in a while, then they have busts because they're trying to do a lot of things.
Yep.
Or the coaches that say, hey, we're going to play one or two coverages for the most part. I mean, no one just plays one or two, but I mean, for the most part.
Yep.
And they then end up playing them really well.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, those Baltimore Ravens defenses that did so well, I mean, they kept people guessing constantly.
Right.
So you didn't know what was coming.
And normally for those defenses to work, you need a coach that's been there a while and a core group of players that have been there a while.
Sure, yes, no question. I'm going to read off some of these other names, and if there's anything else that bounces off, from a secondary standpoint.
You're just talking about the players, not how I think they're going to match up yet.
Yeah, I want to get to the matchups after.
Okay.
All right, so you got the McCourty twins, Jason McCourty and Devin McCourty. Jason is
By the way, Devin McCourty is, to me, the best back-end safety in the NFL.
That's it. I mean, I would say that probably matches up with what you see on film. Patrick Chung at strong safety. Other guys that kind of play key roles. Jonathan Jones is one of their big nickel players.
Number 31, he's their slot corner for the most part. Again, not every snap, but for the most part.
Certainly not every snap. J.C. Jackson is also a big player.
A player I loved coming out of Maryland.
Yep.
And I know that he had issues in his previous stop, which I think was Florida.
I believe so, yes.
And therefore, I think some people shied away.
Yep.
I actually, when I watched him in college, thought that he could be a Bill Belichick type player, and it just kind of worked out that way.
You see those sometimes every once in a while. Then Duron Harmon, probably fits that bill as well.
No question.
Yeah,
Coming out of Rutgers.
Yeah,
Yep.
you say, he would fit well in that kind of a scheme. All right, so we've talked about some of the names now. How do you feel that they will try and deploy these guys against the Eagles pass catchers?
I've been thinking a lot about this, and again, it doesn't mean I'm going to be right about what I think, but I think that when you look at the Eagles offense, the player I think that you have to take away in the pass game is Zach Ertz.
Okay.
Would you agree with that for the most part?
Yeah, and I would say that a lot of teams have tried to do that through. I mean, you look at Detroit and Matt Patricia; they tried to bracket Ertz.
No
they
question.
Did some different things. Yep.
And even who the Eagles just Chicago.
Chicago. Yes.
Even there was a critical third down, and we spoke about this last week, where they technically bracketed him, and he actually cut outside of the corner screen, who should not have allowed him to cut outside, and they converted a big third down.
Right.
But I think back to last year in the AFC Championship game.
Okay, so that was Patriots and
Chiefs. And obviously the Chiefs have Tyreek Hill. The Eagles don't have that player. So the Patriots doubled him on almost every snap. But what they did with Travis Kelce, who's more athletic than Ertz, in the context of the offense, he may not be more important than Ertz is to the Eagles, but he's a more athletic guy.
Right.
What Belichick did in that AFC Championship game is he put J.C. Jackson on him man-to-man pretty much the whole game. Now, I don't want to sit here because I didn't just study it before I came into the building.
Sure.
But that's what they did. So maybe there were some snaps where they did bracket him, or maybe they did double him. I can't answer that for sure.
Yep.
But the general concept was J.C. Jackson, a big physical corner, matched up on Travis Kelce, and he did a phenomenal job. Kelce was not a factor at all as a receiver in that game. So my thought process is, do they do that with Ertz?
Right.
And because they're a man-to-man team. That's their core. That's their foundation. And do they line up J.C. Jackson on Ertz? And, maybe on some third downs, they bracket him or double.
Yeah.
But overall, hey, that's your guy.
Right.
We're going to line you up. You play him.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I feel like, what you heard, and we've seen this from Belichick in the past, is, they're going to try and bracket a team's number one guy, and then they would take, like, back when they had, like, Revis. We're going to take Revis, and he's going to go one-on-one with the number two guy because we trust him to go on an island and to take the bracket to take away the number one.
Right, because then what you do is you add extra defenders to play everybody else.
Right.
Now, they could put Gilmore. I don't think Gilmore will play Ertz personally, but you never know with Bill Belichick.
Sure.
But they could also put Gilmore on Nelson Aguilar and double Jeffrey. You never know.
Right, yep.
You never know with Belichick.
Sure.
But I just think he's going to look at Ertz as the player. He's not going to want to walk out of the stadium on Sunday and say, oh, we would have won the game, but Zach Ertz beat us.
Right.
That's not the way Bill Belichick thinks.
Right. So let me ask you this thing, because we're going to talk about this. It'll be a segment you're going to break down an Eagles game plan. So if you want a really thorough film breakdown, make sure you check that out later this week. What are the ways to defeat bracket coverage?
You mean with that player who's being bracketed?
Well, actually, I guess yes. I guess that's a good question.
Theoretically, you shouldn't be throwing the ball.
Right,
there.
you don't want to throw the ball to him. So, what are the ways that you can try and do it if you're going to that guy or not going to that guy? Are there ways from a schematic standpoint that come to mind that you say, okay, this is a good tactic to try and use against a team? Well,
I think what you can do is you can do certain things that take away the bracket. You can use motion. You can get a motion to a stack and then create a situation where it's much more difficult to bracket that receiver than based on his release stem. Things like that. You don't want to just line up a receiver in a stagnant spot where they can set the bracket up and then you really shouldn't be throwing to that receiver.
Right.
But you can do motion, which the Eagles do a lot of, whether it's across the formation or return motion, just something that prevents the bracket from settling in before the snap of the ball.
I'll say this. We've got a couple clips from Super Bowl 52 where they bracketed Ertz and they found ways to attack those brackets. So Greg will be breaking that down. So make sure you keep an eye out for that on Eagles game plan later this week. All right. When we're talking about the secondary, you mentioned it's a lot of man coverage. We've seen a lot of cover zero from this team.
And I think they'll do that at times in this game.
That was going to be my question is, do you think that they're going to be a blitz heavy in this game against Carson Wentz?
Blitz heavy is a relative term.
Of course.
Obviously. I think they will bring out zero blitz at times. I think you'll see it on third down. You might see it in the red zone where Bill Belichick has been known to do that for years and years and years. I can remember seeing it on first down out of base. I mean, you never know with Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
But I think the concept of zero blitz, he will do that in this game.
So knowing this, what is this? Obviously, we're talking about big picture, like beating the blitz. But now taking this back, knowing everything that we've talked about, the coverage, the matchups and coverage,
Right.
the potential for heavy blitz, zero at times, cover one at times. What are you thinking from a game plan standpoint for the Eagles offense? What does this mean going
There's one
here?
other thing I think Belichick's going to do.
Okay. What do you got?
I think when Carson Wentz is in the gun and Miles Sanders is offset
Okay.
and it's second or third down,
Yep.
he's going to use what I call the bullseye tactic.
Okay.
He's going to take the outside edge player,
Right.
whether it's Van Noy, whether it's Simon, whoever it is,
Don't let him get a free release.
and they're going to run right at him
Yeah.
and smack him, just like he did to Marshall Faulk in the Super Bowl when they beat the Rams 18, 19 years ago. I call that the bullseye tactic. Other people might have different names.
Right.
I don't think he's going to let Miles Sanders out on a free release and be involved in the passing game.
Well, especially after Super Bowl 52 with Corey Clement. I mean, he
Right.
was such a big player out of the
Right.
backfield in that game. You know, with a guy
But I
who's more
think that-
dynamic than that in Sanders,
Right,
you
and
don't
I
want
think
that to happen.
they probably didn't see Clement that way.
Of course, that's what I mean. Yes, exactly.
I think they'll see Sanders that way.
Right. Interesting.
So that's just something else to look
Something to keep an eye
for
on.
in this game.
So I get to defeat that. That's one of those things
It's a
where
tough deal.
Yeah, I mean, you're
They'll
trying.
sacrifice pass rush
Yep.
to take Sanders out
Right. I mean, because they're not a
when
team.
he's offset, not if he's in the eye.
They're not a team that you look at and say like, oh man, you got to stop Chandler Jones. You've got to stop Trey Flowers.
They don't have the one guy you look at. They've got a bunch of guys.
They've got 32 sacks in 9 games.
I know,
They're third in the
they're
league.
really good with stunts.
Yeah. Yes, they are.
They're really good with guys who you don't even think about.
Lawrence Guy and Adam
Butler,
Yep.
a free agent from Vanderbilt, who, by the way, I watched coming out because he
Yep.
played on the same team with Zach Cunningham.
Right.
And I actually thought Adam Butler could play in the NFL, and I guess Belichick feels the same way.
I'm going to be talking about him very shortly,
Yeah.
so I'm glad you share. I didn't know that you felt that way about him coming
Yeah.
out. No, but Jamie Collins, big part of what they do.
Very
from a pressure
athletic.
star point. Yep. And
Van Noy is Kyle Van Noy is a really good player for them.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what his stats are because he's not necessarily a sack guy.
Yep.
My guess is he's not going to have 150 tackles, but he's a really important part of what they do.
Yep. So you look at at the second level. John Simon, Jamie Collins, Dante Hightower. These are guys that are interchangeable. They kind of move inside, outside, off
got
the
another
ball,
linebacker
off the
I
line of
really-
scrimmage.
I re-
Landon Roberts plays in
There's
base.
one other linebacker I really like. He got hurt last year. I'm trying to think of his name.
All right, Jawan Bentley,
Jawan
the
Bentley.
Purdue kid.
That's it. He was there last year and he got hurt.
Yeah, he started for them early in the year. and he
Yeah,
got
last
hurt.
year
Yeah.
he played a lot early,
Yeah.
and I loved him on tape, and then I think he was lost for the season,
Yeah.
and he's back now.
I didn't love him at Purdue.
I didn't watch him at Purdue, so I can't answer that.
Because him and another teammate came out. I forget the other
but
Purdue
I
linebacker.
think he's a good player.
Yeah, he's starting a nice player for them.
Yeah.
They play a lot of those guys, and they're used.
That's why they're a tough watch. I mean, they play a lot of guys.
We didn't mention. All right, so Dietrich Wise, Danny Shelton is a brick house on the inside.
He was a first-round pick.
First-round pick out of Cleveland. Shalik Calhoun, their fourth-round pick, who some people thought could have gone higher.
Right.
By Oakland. Chase Winovich. When you talk about
Winovich is a good player too.
So what does Chase Winovich do well? Oh, he's really good on stunts and twists. He's a high effort player. All they do is say, it's second and 8. All right, we're running a TE stunt with Adam Butler and Chase Winovich. Those guys play so well off of each other.
Yeah, I mean,
really good with stunts and twists.
They're really good with stunts. It's a tough deal.
So it's a big assignment game plan game from a protection standpoint for the
Without
Eagles offensive
question.
line. Speaking of the offensive line, Brandon Brooks,
I saw
big
it.
extension, highest paid guard in football.
I saw he got Fran Duffy money.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not even going down that road. No, I think when you look at Brandon, I mean, he's certainly the way that he's played.
He's a really good player.
Yeah, he's been awesome.
Yeah.
So really, really happy for him to get that kind of extension. But yeah, big week for the Eagles offensive line in this game, just because from a mental standpoint,
A lot of pre-snap recognition is required because, you and I don't quite study it in that kind of detail because otherwise we just can't.
Right.
But there's always tells, and so it's a big homework week.
Yeah, big homework week.
Yeah.
Anything else? Defense? I think we've kind of covered it from,
No, I think
from
we're
the
good on
Patriots
the
defense. All right, let's go over to the
And I
offense.
think I got the points in that I think could happen in the game.
They've got this quarterback, Tom Brady, so you got to worry about him. It's kind of important.
for us, who know him, we call him TB12.
Right. I mean, I'm sure you've had plenty of conversations with him in the past. So you and Tom, the first name
we
basis.
hang out.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The numbers aren't great, but like I'm watching their offense again today, and I'm buzzing through, and like it's third and 12. You see him step up in the pocket, and he delivers this ball over the middle of the field. And it's like, oh, okay, there's pocket movement, there's poise. You see I think it's all still there from a execution standpoint. I just think that the numbers obviously have not been great this year.
I think there's a couple of things that you hope from an Eagles perspective can be positive for them.
Okay.
They're not running the ball like they did last year over the final 7-8 weeks.
I think the line play hasn't been as great.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think that the loss of Devlin, the fullback, by the way, has been a big factor.
Yep.
Because down the stretch last year, all the way through the Super Bowl, they became a 21 personnel offense to some degree. I mean, obviously, when I say that, not 100% of the snaps,
right.
but... And 21 meaning two backs and a tight end.
Of course, thank you.
And of course, the tight end was Gronkowski, who they don't have right now. But
I love how you throw the right now in there because
you never know.
Yeah, right.
You never know. Well, he won't be there this Sunday. Let's put it that way.
He's not going to be there this Sunday. And the way he looks, I can't imagine.
No. And so then they played a lot with two tight ends, and they would use a tight end in the backfield at times as well.
Yep.
But then the last game they played last week when they lost, they played 11 personnel the whole game.
Yeah.
They did not play with two tight ends. So I don't know what they're going to do this week. Now, tight ends have been injured. I know Ryan Izzo, I think, had a concussion.
I believe so.
I think Lacoste has a knee. I don't know if they're ready after the bye.
Right.
We won't know that yet. It's early in the week.
Yeah, it's early in the week, yes.
So I don't know if you'll still see 11 personnel or if you'll see more 12 personnel, which had been anywhere from 25 to 30% of their snaps prior to this last game against the Ravens.
Right. So the team is also expecting N'Keal Harry at some point. They traded a second-round pick for Mohamed Sanu.
Right. Who played literally every snap in the last game.
So Julian Edelman, I know, has been battling injuries, but he's still out there.
So maybe they're an 11 personnel team now, given what they might view as the strength of their offense, which could be wide receiver.
I want to ask. I don't want to change gears that quickly, but the running backs in the pass game, obviously a big factor of what they do. You talk James White. You talk about with Rex Burkhead and even Sony Michel as well. All three guys, big parts of what they do in the pass game.
And sometimes even Brandon Bolden.
That's a good point. Yeah, he caught that wheel route against
Washington for a touchdown, where they got him matched up on Ryan Anderson.
Yeah, I think they regret that bump call on the late motion. So they if I remember right, they motioned Bolden in late.
I did it in the matchup show.
Did they? Okay.
He moved Bolden to the right. He was an eye back, and then he just moved him to the right, and that changed how the Redskins would match up, and they got him matched up on Ryan Anderson, who's essentially an edge pass rusher.
Yeah, you don't want him running 30 yards downfield the back. Even Brandon Bolden's not dynamic, what you would say, but yeah.
James White's probably the most critical guy of this group, although Burkhead's very good as well. And
he is third in the NFL, James White, in third down conversions for catches for third down conversions. I mean, he's a big part of what they do offensively from the passing game standpoint.
And he's good in many different ways. Obviously, he can catch the short pass, he can catch the flat route, he can catch angle routes, but he can also catch wheel routes. We saw him, and I can't remember if it was a wheel route, but it was a vertical route. I remember him catching a vertical route against Matt Milano with the Bills a few weeks ago.
Yep. He's running like comebacks. He's doing a lot of different things. He runs routes like a receiver. Slants from out wide. I know they love to use empty sets. Talk about the strength, what the positives are of going into empty if you're the Patriots.
Well, because they have Brady, who sees everything, obviously what happens is you make the defense declare, and he knows where to go with the football. Brady, to me, the great quarterbacks in this league, and Brady obviously fits that category, they know where to go with the ball before the ball snapped. And I think Brady's as good as there is in that regard.
Right.
You rarely see, it happens every once in a while, but you rarely see Brady stuck in the pocket.
Right, yep.
I mean, obviously, look, no quarterback likes to get hit. Brady absolutely falls into that category. If you can get to him early in the game, there have been instances over the last couple of years, and I've watched every game, and this is I think ideally this is what the Eagles want to do, but there have been instances where he starts to play a little fast.
Yep.
And I don't know if you've noticed that at all.
Especially if you get pressure in his face early.
Right.
Yep.
He starts to play a little fast.
Yep.
There have been snaps where he then sort of feels it when it's not really there, and you can kind of see him flinch for a second. So if you can get early pressure and not let him settle in. Now, having said that, maybe the Patriots come out and empty. Maybe they do some no huddle, which they do selectively, and they're very good at it.
Yep.
Maybe they try to take it to the Eagles in a sense, so the Eagles can't settle in themselves and dictate with maybe some of their pressure concepts.
Yeah, I mean the Baltimore, they got to him on a couple overload pressures in the first 2 drives.
The first 2 third downs, they got to him with really good overload pressure concepts.
Yep, it was really good stuff.
Right. Now, the Eagles normally don't do that.
Right.
I guarantee it's in their playbook.
Right.
It's in everybody's playbook.
Yep.
So now you have to decide, do you want to deploy that?
Yeah.
But the Ravens did a great job on those first 2 third downs. One of them, they got Brady off his spot, and he just threw it away. The other one, they sacked him.
Yep. So to me, I think you go back to what we saw from the Eagles last time they took the field against Chicago, what they've done from a front alignment standpoint with this defensive line. We saw some 4 defensive end looks with Fletcher Cox. Different where you're stacking the front one way, doing all different like long stunts and trying to get guys looping inside unblocked. That's an area where I wonder if you'll see something like that in this game.
Is Isaiah Wynn due to be back this week?
I don't believe so.
Because I think I read that he
I'd have
was
to check on that. It is early in the week.
But I don't know what kind. Practicing could be a lot of things.
Sure, yes.
Because I think he's a good player and will be a good player if he can just stay healthy and get on the field.
Which he hasn't for a couple of years.
No.
Yeah. No, I think that's going to be something that's obviously big in this game. That's why a guy like Fletcher Cox, whoever's lined up inside, if it's Brandon Graham lined up inside and on sub-package downs, getting pressure to him early up front.
Right.
You say that for every quarterback, but especially for Brady, to try and get to him, that's the way to do it.
No question. And I think to some degree you have to do that, although they're not as and I'm sure they've scored a lot of points this year. I don't know what their points per game are, but just watching them on tape, I think they're missing some things that they had a year ago. And obviously, the player Gronkowski is a big factor, but the run game is just not the same.
It's not.
Right now.
Yeah.
Right, maybe it will become that, but it's not the same right now.
They're 30th right now in yards per carry. 3.3 yards per carry. Scoring, they're middle of the pack. Passing, they're a little bit lower in yards per attempt, yards per catch. The offensive numbers definitely not as good. I mean, third down conversions, they're not as good. They're middle of the road. Completion percentage on third down is 52%. That's 30th in the league.
Right.
So the numbers across the board haven't been great offensively. I think it's mostly just me guess. I would say offensive line play is I would say the biggest contributing factor. Although they've had a lot of injuries in the pass catchers. And, Philip Dorsett was out, and then he comes back. Josh Gordon was in and out before he was released. And N'Keal Harry's been out the whole season. So Edelman's been battling stuff. So they've kind of. Let me ask you about this thing. They trade for Mohamed Sanu. How do you feel he fits big picture into this offense? Because I think a lot of people feel with the absence of Gronk, having a guy in the middle of the field like that is where he can kind of fill in.
And I think they're less beholden to outside, inside, the way they think about how they line people up.
Right. Because most people say, Julian Edelman's the slot receiver.
But he isn't.
Right.
As you know from watching their
Exactly,
tape.
yeah.
Just like Sanu. He's a slot guy. Well, not necessarily for them.
Right, they can't all be slot guys.
Exactly, right. So, I think he fits very well because I think he has a really good feel for finding voids in zone. I think he has a very good feel for uncovering. I think he'll pick up a lot of their choice and option routes, which happen after the snap of the ball. I think he's that kind of receiver.
So what are the keys to the game for this Eagles defense then?
Well, the Patriots still do try to run the ball.
Yep.
They're not just
going to mail it in. No, for sure.
No. So again, this is not a profound statement, but you have to keep them running the way they've been running, which is not particularly good.
Yep.
And then I think absolutely, and it has to start early in the game, you have to make Brady feel pressure. It's not sacks. If you sack him, great.
Yep.
But you have to make him feel that he has to play a little bit faster than he wants to. Because we've seen him do that at times.
Yep.
And then I would say, and I'm curious to see what Jim Schwartz does, the Eagles are normally not a double team when they play.
They typically have not been.
Yeah.
They've done it a little bit in the past. We've seen it against Julio. We've seen it at times with like Antonio Brown a few years ago in Pittsburgh.
Remember.
There was some time, but not often.
I'd be curious to see if he feels that Julian Edelman needs to be doubled in specific game situations.
Yeah, the ways that they've done the quote unquote doubles in the past have been they're going to play quarter, half, and they're going to play half over safety over the top to the boundary.
They normally don't do what we call a dedicated
correct.
double.
Yes, they don't really see that. So
Right.
against a guy like
We've
Edelman,
seen him
where you
do
don't
Beckham, double him at times.
Exactly. Yep, that's a good point.
Right.
But with a guy like Edelman, where you don't know where he's going to line up,
it becomes hard.
Saying, "Oh, we're going to put a safety over the top," doesn't work that way.
And then you have to be a little careful because Edelman moves around and he also goes in motion a lot.
Yep.
And you don't want to get stuck where, hey, you and I were supposed to double him, and now he moves, and now someone else has to.
No one's doubling. No one's covering.
And then you get and then you get stuck.
Right.
So you have to be a little careful with that because don't forget the Patriots will know this too.
Sure, of course. It's gonna be a fun matchup. I'm excited to watch it. It's on both sides of the ball. A lot of really interesting games within the game and one-on-one matchups that'll be a lot of fun to watch. And with both teams having a little bit extra time to kind of self-evaluate and also prepare for each other, it should make for a really fun chess match.
No, and I think it'll be interesting with the Patriots coming in after a loss because that Belichick, it's he probably did a lot of self-evaluating.
Rough 2 weeks, yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, no question.
Yeah.
All right, well, let me ask you this. Big week of college football. Did you take in any college games?
Well, I watched the Alabama LSU game.
Hell of a game.
It was a fun game to watch. I mean, LSU, I thought, kind of dominated the game.
Yeah. They did. I mean, the way that Bama came back, mid-third quarter, that was impressive. A lot of guys on both sides.
Oh my God, there's going to be a lot of pros.
Yeah. I watched 12 o'clock. I watched the Penn State Minnesota game as well, which was also a great one.
I didn't see that one.
Yeah, it was a fun game.
What was on at night? I'm trying to remember what I watched at night.
So you had Oklahoma, Iowa State. Turned out to be a nice game.
Yeah, I watched a little of that, not too much.
Pulled one out late, and Clemson, NC State. Yeah. I started there. Full disclosure, fell asleep, which was 28-0 by the end of the first quarter. Yeah. So fell asleep during the game, woke up for mid to late third quarter for Oklahoma, went over there and watched them just
I got to admit, I've just seen TV, and I don't know if you've taken a peek at them on tape at all, but it was the first full LSU game I watched. I've seen bits and pieces. I was impressed with Joe Burrow.
I think Joe Burrow might be real dealish.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's one of those guys, just again, this is TV watching. I think he's a loose, easy thrower. He's not a gun, but he can make the throws.
Yep.
I think he's one of those guys that's kind of naturally accurate. I think he just puts the ball where it needs to be.
He's going to be very interesting because he's not like toolsy. He's not as toolsy as Justin Herbert or Jordan Love or even Tua. But I think
I did watch Jordan Love, by the way. They played at night.
Oh, they played. That's right. He had I know statistically it was a very good.
He had a very good game. I knew there was a game I watched at night, and I couldn't. It was 2 days ago. I can't remember.
Well, of course, we've watched a lot of football since that point.
I know.
Well, no, I'm glad that you brought that. It was a very good game, really fun game to watch.
Yeah.
But Burrow's going to be very interesting just because he's playing the position very, very well.
Correct.
How you discern that from who's a better prospect, it's going to be an interesting discussion over the next few months.
Without question. And I think he's going to be one of the, I don't want to say he'll be polarizing because my guess is no one's going to say they hate him.
Right.
But now we're talking about, is he a top 1 or 2 or 3 pick in a draft?
Of course.
That's a different question.
Well, I caught up with Eagles Vice President of Player Personnel, Andy Weidel, this week on the Journey to the Draft podcast. I actually talked with him about what he was doing during that Alabama-LSU game. So if you want to check out that interview, that'll be on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA later this week.
Wow. All right.
So a little plug. I was a little cross-promotion.
Nicely done.
Oh, thank you.
Nicely done.
All right. Well, Greg, excited to break this game down with you next week here on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade. Thanks, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right.
Well, great stuff from Greg, and you could follow him on Twitter just like I do, at Greg Cosell. And while you're at it, I'm at FDuffy3. That's where I post all the podcasts I'm a part of and all of the X's and O's content that we produce at PhiladelphiaEagles.com. And you know how much I appreciate everybody that promotes this podcast on any form of social media. But the best way to promote the show and to help the show is to go onto Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, leave us a rating and leave us a comment. And I want to give a shout out to a couple of people who did that over the last couple of weeks. We'll start off with Ryan K823, who left a 5-star review and left a question saying, "Hey Fran, love the coverage breakdowns with Greg. Do you know more about the Eagles' coverage tendencies, i.e. how often they are in a form of cover 3 versus quarters versus man? I feel that they are a single high most frequently to be stout against the run, but I would like to see more too high looks to help out the corner. So, Ryan, it's a really good question. And yes, the Eagles are primarily a single high team, but they do go into split safety looks. We've seen them play we've seen them play quarters coverage. They've been a big Tampa 2 team in the past. I know early on when Jim Schwartz is here, they played a lot of Tampa 2, particularly on third down. And honestly, a lot of this coverage, this Tampa 2 invert that a lot of people have talked about, that is kind of seen as a too high look as well, not necessarily a single high look because there's no safety in the deep post. So, and that's a little bit of an inverted coverage. But I think, certainly they mix things up because you don't want to be always one thing or the other. They do mix things up, primarily single high. I think the big thing to keep in mind, though, look, the Eagles, they put a priority on stopping the run, and they're a top 5 run defense this year. Obviously, that's with a tough outing against the Dallas Cowboys a few weeks ago. They're a top 5 run defense. Typically, when you're going to be a really good run-stopping team, you're going to be a single-high team because you've got that extra man down close to the line of scrimmage. You're playing primarily with too high. That now removes a defender from the box, and you're going to open things up for opposing run games. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing, too, is that it's not all about, playing with too high safeties doesn't solve everything. Like we've talked about many times on the show, every coverage has holes. Every coverage has weaknesses. So, you could play, whether it's cover 2 or 2-man, any kind of form of split safety coverage. Teams can find ways to poke holes in it. You still have to be very sound. You still have to be very good at the corner spot. You have to be tight in coverage underneath. We saw last night with the Green Bay Packers. They gave up they had that huge completion to Jimmy Graham down the seam, and Troy Aikman, talking, how could Carolina allow Jimmy Graham to get down the seam wide open like that? They're in cover 2, and Aaron Rodgers did a great job, and it was a wide open. It was next play in the passing game, and Jimmy Graham was wide open. So every coverage has its holes. Every coverage has its weaknesses, but it's important to just be able to play sound technique no matter what position, what coverage you're playing in. Everybody's got to know their role. Everybody's got to do their job and execute to a high level. Otherwise, you're going to give up some big plays. But yes, to answer your question, they are primarily single high. They do mix in some too high looks at times. The definition of too high is, I guess, what some people get caught up in, but plenty of split safety looks with this team. But all right, let's get to the next one. Teef 215 left a 5-star review saying how much they appreciate the podcast and listen every week. Weissalater 1 left a 5-star review as well, saying it's a one-of-a-kind podcast that both teaches and entertains the listeners. So Weiss, really appreciate it. I really appreciate all 3 of you and everybody out there for listening to the podcast each week, and for everybody that has gone on and left a rating, left a comment on our Apple Podcast page or wherever podcasts can be found. All right. Let's make the next jump here to the next part of the show. It's time for Scouting Report. I told you earlier we're going to break down kind of an underrated player on this Patriots defense, and a guy that really doesn't get talked about enough, and I would say that's defensive tackle Adam Butler. This is a third-year player now out of Vanderbilt. We're going to break him down now in Scouting Report.
Dim those lights. We're headed to the film room for the Scouting Report.
All right, so I wanted to break down Adam Butler because I think it's a really interesting conversation to have, because he was a guy that was very unheralded coming out of Vanderbilt. Yeah, he had some production in the SEC. I want to say he may have been one of the leaders in production from a sack standpoint, from a TFL standpoint over the course of his career with the Commodores. But very interesting start to his NFL career, and I want to kind of get into it. Let's get into my notes. I watched him for a few games down there at Vandy. He didn't go to the Senior Bowl. He wasn't at the Shrine Game. I'm not even sure that he was even at the Combine. I think he was at the Combine, but definitely was underrated throughout the course of the process. He was a 3-year starter at nose tackle in that 3-4 scheme down there for Derek Mason. 6'4", 293, so a little bit tall, but he was light, and he played lighter than 293 during his time at Stanford, or during his time at Vanderbilt. So this is a guy that was a little bit light, not the prototypical nose tackle, but he had a really good first step. He gained a lot of ground, could threaten edges as a penetrator off the ball. Good athlete, had the quickness to win at the line of scrimmage and the burst to close into the backfield. Teams tried to trap him. I remember watching him. Teams tried to trap him, pull a guard from the backside, and kind of take him out of the play. He was able to recognize that, showed the quickness to defeat those blocks and get to the football. As a pass rusher, his go-to move was a hand swipe. Won in a lot of different ways, though. He could, typically if he got blocked high side, he showed the ability to spin back in. So smart, high side pass rusher, had the ability to penetrate, make plays in the backfield. Used very often, by the way, on stunts and twists because of his athleticism. He was very, very effective in that role, and we're going to get to why that's important here in a little bit. The negatives, He wasn't a powerful player, didn't get a lot of ability to collapse the pocket there as a bull rusher. He could get displaced in the run game. I was worried overall about his play strength and his ability to hold up. There were times where he tried to play low and he locked out and he looked the part, but too often he got stuck on blocks or got put on the ground. I thought he was on the ground way too much at Vanderbilt. Wanted to see him finish better as a tackler as well. I thought he left some production on the field. Again, going back to that play strength. So ultimately, what I wrote down about Adam Butler was, looks like a developmental prospect, more of a penetrator and a disruptor than a point-of-attack run defender, like his first step in his overall athleticism, but he needs to get stronger before being relied on to be a full-time contributor in an NFL defense. So how does this relate now to the projection from college to the NFL? And I think a lot of people will say, you know what, it's all about what a player can do and not what he can't do. I was worried about his play strength. I said, you know what, it's going to take time before he's relied on to be a key part of an NFL defense, which he increasingly has done that. He's more every single year. 2017, the year these two teams met in the Super Bowl, that was his rookie season. He only played in their dime sub package where they played with 3 down linemen. They did all kinds of blitzes and stunts and twists, all kinds of things. So this guy was never, hey, I'm going to line up in the A gap and I'm going to rush the A gap. He was always being moved around. So what I love about this projection is that this was a guy that certainly had flaws coming out of college and some things that honestly are very tough for me to get past. If you're talking about a defensive lineman, interior player who struggles to hold up against the run on a consistent basis, I struggle seeing how he's going to be able to compete in the NFL, and be a key contributor. You're talking about a player that, was inconsistent to being able to finish tackles. I had concerns about, okay, is this going to be a guy that you're going to be able to play, and be a key contributor? They found a nice little role. He was a niche player for them early on in his career. They've continued to expand on that. Now, as he's gotten a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, a little bit more refined, he's gotten better across the board in all areas of his game. Now he's not just a specialty package for them anymore. Now you can see him worked into their other different dime packages up front. You could see him worked into some of their nickel packages up front. So I think when you look at a player like an Adam Butler, if you're a fan of college football and you like following the NFL draft and trying to see, okay, how is this guy going to project to the league, it is always important to try and keep in mind, this is what a guy does well. Now, is he going to go to a team that's going to try and leverage what he does well? Let's not ask him to do things that are going to put him in a bad position. And what can he do well? Those are the things we're going to ask him to do. I mentioned he was really good on film on stunts and twists. He goes to New England. What does New England ask him to do? They're going to ask him to do different stunts and twists. Now, this being said, it's not, we're talking about this actually this week on the Journey to the Draft podcast. We got a great question from a listener. We're going to talk about it this week on the show. It's not just about what a guy did at the college level. Okay, we're going to take it. It's apples to apples. We're going to take it and put it into the NFL. It's also, what can a guy do for you? So maybe Adam Butler, let's say he wasn't used often on stunts and twists. That might be a projection that, the Patriots or any NFL team, they bring Adam Butler in for a workout before the draft, and they have him do all kinds of drills where you're going to see his athleticism on display. You're going to see that lateral quickness, that ability to turn a tight corner and explode and get to the cone quickly. And you say, you know what? This guy wasn't used on stunts and twists a lot throughout the course of his career, but we think in our scheme, he could really do that at a high level. And I think if you want to bring this back to the Eagles, go to Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders was not a big-time pass catcher during his 1 year as a starter at Penn State. He was not a big featured part of the passing game, and that was a question mark. Hey, he's shown a little bit as a blocker. I saw some good things from him in pass protection at Penn State, but I thought there was a lot of meat on the bone there with him as a pass catcher. He wasn't used vertically down the field. He was used in the screen game, and he caught some catches in the flat, but you didn't see wheel routes. You didn't see sail routes. You didn't see him running down the seam. Now the Eagles work him out. Other teams worked him out. We had James Franklin on the show the day we drafted him, and the head coach of Penn State said, yeah, the feedback we got from NFL teams during the process was, we really love what this guy can do for us in the pass game. We wanted to use him that way if he came back his senior year. We just didn't do it enough this year as a junior. And I think when you look at how the Eagles have used Miles Sanders, that's a really good way to say, you know what? This is what a guy has put on film in college, but we've seen him in workouts. We've seen what he can do. We're going to project that he can do this for us in the NFL as an NFL player. It's a really fascinating part of the projection from college to the NFL, one of the things I love most about the NFL draft. So I thought, you know what? Let's pick a player that's a little bit off the radar for the Patriots defense. Let's look at an Adam Butler and kind of open up that discussion for projecting college players to the NFL. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. All right, loaded show here this week. Obviously a big game. Excited to go watch this game here on Sunday afternoon. Eagles versus Patriots. We'll be back here next Monday night on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade for everybody here at the NovaCare Complex. I am Fran Duffy. We will talk to you next week.